All right, we can go. Go ahead and get started here. Thanks everybody for being here today. This is our second public information session. I don't know why that feedback is happening. All right, we'll try again. Thanks for being here today for the second of our information sessions regarding the library referendum question. Before we get started with the presentation, I just want to kind of outline the process for the session. This meeting is being broadcast live on our YouTube channel and is also available virtually for people attending through Zoom. For those of you in person, there's a sign-up sheet should you want to ask any questions or make comments following the presentation. And there's also frequently asked question and a fact sheet available as you walk in as well. And we will, for those online, we'll explain later how you can access those materials. For anyone later online that wants to speak, just please utilize the raise hand feature. And for those in person, we'll have the mic on for you, and it's just at the table in front of you here. We'll make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak, and we just won't. Our only caveat is we just won't have a second opportunity to speak until everyone has a first opportunity to speak, and then we have a 3-minute 3-minute timer that you'll see per person. So. With that, some. No, it was the feedback you were hearing. For some reason, the room was coming off mute. The entire, like the Zoom, the Cottage Grove cable.
Hey,
Zoom.
Matt, we can't hear you.
I don't know. I'm not doing anything different than I've always done. It's muted right now.
Yeah.
I'm asking to unmute.
So now he's the sound is on, try.
Well, it should be.
So can we have your computer, the mic?
All right, let's try that now. Can someone online give a thumbs up or something?
Perfect, Matt.
All right, lucky for you didn't miss anything. It was just, yeah, just outlining the process. So for those online, if when it's time to speak, if you want to raise your hand, if you want to ask questions, our clerk, Lisa Collada, will call on you. So with that, I'm Matt Giese, Village Administrator. I've been in this role with the village for the past, this will be year number 14. I oversee the day-to-day operations of the village and implement village board policy and direction. I'm going to be the primary presenter today, but with me here to help assist with answering questions, we have Cameron Sawyer, our Assistant Administrator and Finance Director, Larry Konopacki, Village Attorney, and Lisa Collada, Village Clerk, who can help answer any voting or election-related questions that you may have. It's important to note that we're exclusively here to educate and inform, meaning we as staff and the village in general are not advocating for a yes or no vote on the referendum. Our primary goal is just that you leave this session more informed than you came, and that you have the resources available to you to make an informed decision for yourself. The village board voted to authorize a library referendum question on April 1st ballot. Voters will be asked whether or not they support up to a $1.3 million increase to the property tax levy to construct and operate the village's first public library. The question is specific to the former Learning Ladder property at 312 West Cottage Grove Road. And it's also important to note that the current library board programming services that are offered are not linked in any way to a yes or no vote on the referendum question. So why is a referendum question necessary? The state imposes tax levy limits on municipalities, and these restrictions limit the amount municipalities can increase the tax levy year to year to no more than a percentage of new taxable value created by new construction and/or increases in debt service. So what that essentially means is that should any municipality want to add a new service, it would have to go to referendum due to the increased operational costs of the service. Although not required, the village board has chosen to include the capital costs, which would otherwise be exempt from levy limits from a debt service perspective, but the board felt it was important to ask for the full freight of the service because there's no sense in having the capital asset if the public doesn't support operating it. Last year, the village board commissioned a study to assess the Learning Ladder property and hired and engaged Engberg Anderson architectural firm to do that. The full report can be found on our library project page, but a summary of the high points we'll just cover here briefly. They looked at several options, but ultimately the option that was chosen and their recommendation was, should the Learning Ladder site be the preferred site for the library, that if you pursued it there, that they would recommend raising the structures on the site and constructing a new library at a total cost of the project, which includes acquisition, construction, soft costs, all in at $8.2 million. The village has not purchased the property, but we do have an option to purchase the property should the referendum be approved. The cost of the option was $40,000 and the full purchase price is $1.4 million. Separate from the $8.2 million in capital costs are operational costs. However, all of these costs are blended into the annual $1.3 million tax levy request. So there's Dane County Library Standards that you may have heard before, which ultimately outline how much outline the scope of the service that we need to provide in order to qualify for eventual exemption from the Dane County Library tax. And the estimated staffing that we would need for this service would be about 6 to 8 full-time equivalent staff. That includes a library director. And then there's a requirement for how much time you are open, and currently that would be approximately 45 hours. As we grow, some initial estimates could see that increase to about 48 hours. So what does this all mean to you as a taxpayer? We've outlined and forecasted anticipated tax impacts per $100,000 of equalized property value. So as you look at this, as you look at these figures, if your home is approximately $400,000, you would multiply these figures by 4, $500,000 by 5, etc. We use equalized value versus assessed value because equalized value is the best or most reliable way to project tax impact into the future. Should you want to find your fair market value or equalized value, you can find that on Access Dane. And if you need help finding that, that's a website that is run through the county. Our finance director can help you with that. On the flip side of the coin, the actual tax impacts may be less depending on the capital campaign effort that is ongoing, as well as potential grants. The village has an active capital campaign with a goal of $1 million in private donations. Currently, there are about 500,000 in pledges contingent on the referendum outcome that have been raised. For perspective on how that may reduce should the referendum be approved, $1 million raised is equivalent to about $13 per $100,000 of equalized value. So for every million raised, you could expect a potential reduction of about $13 per 100,000 in equalized value. In addition to the capital campaign, as mentioned before, there's a Dane County library tax that is that you don't explicitly see on your taxes. It's included in the Dane County portion of your levy on the tax bill, and currently that is about $34 per 100,000 in equalized value. And at some point in the future, should the referendum be approved and the village meets the standards, then that tax would come off of your tax bill. If a majority of voters vote yes, the village would be authorized to exercise the option to purchase and to develop and construct and ultimately operate a library at 312 West Cottage Grove Road with up to the $1.3 million in additional levy resources. If the result is a no vote, then a library service would not be provided at 312 West Cottage Grove Road. The following is exactly how the referendum question shows up or will show up on your ballot. We understand that it is somewhat of a cumbersome or overly complicated way to ask the question. However, this is the format that is required by law. There are several different ways you can cast your ballot. There's absentee mail-in, early in-person voting, and then, of course, election day itself, April 1st. All the information can be found both on our website, but also on myvote.wi.gov. And you can see the website for all of our library project page, or that will send you to the library project page that has all of our information related to everything from frequently asked questions, but also the full Engberg-Anderson report from the site, as well as our financial management plan, which shows the village's financial model, both including the library and not including the library. So you can kind of compare and contrast those. And then if there's questions that anyone has following today, staff's there to, we have a email address, referendum@villageofcottagegrove.gov, that you can see on the screen there, that we can address your questions at any time. So with that, our clerk will call on people. Depending on how many we have online, we may rotate between online questions and in person. And then also, I'd appreciate no Badger game spoilers later on. If anyone has those, I don't want them, so. That's all I have, so Lisa, feel free to when you're ready.
Seeing that we have nobody online, we'll start with Kelm Nelson.
All right, I'm Cindy Kelm Nelson. I am proud to serve as one of your elected village trustees. I am the library board president, the facilities chair for the library board, and the library capital campaign chair. But most importantly, I'm your neighbor and an unwavering library advocate. Some may even go as far as to call me a fanatic. Community voices have shaped every step of this process, and my votes on the village board to move this forward reflect the individuals that I am proud to represent. My commitment, along with that of the library board's collective mission, vision, core values, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging in community, along with our formal strategic plans, remains to create a public library that reflects and serves this community. I am a definite expert on this project. I have donated thousands of hours of my time each year since 2019. I have missed dinners and bedtimes with my children. But I have done this because I believe so deeply in what a public library will mean for our community. This is not a rushed decision or a half-baked plan. This is not a reckless tax increase. The village board controls a small portion of your tax bill, and the project fits strategically within long-term financial planning. We have mitigated risk. A library is not in competition with other village priorities. No money is being taken from public safety, fire, police, or EMS. The village did not overpay $1.5 million or 3 to 4 times more than market rate. That is a flat out lie. The attraction to the Learning Ladder site is the following. The site is ready. It's located in our downtown. It's bikeable, walkable, near senior housing, links neighborhoods, and backs up to 11 acres of the village's community park. It is a safe site. It has served as a daycare for this community's babies for 30 years. It brings a full-service public library here within our village borders, and that is what this vote is on. The village does not own other sites or empty lots. The Friends site is not available for a library. It is not the selected location for the village board or the library board. It is not site ready. It would cost millions more to study, develop, and build on. I am aware of the tax impact, and I am doing everything in my professional and personal capacity to reduce that. The village's formal capital campaign has actually raised over $530,000 and is expected to continue fundraising through the duration of this project. I have zero doubt that we will exceed our goal. I have personally applied for millions of dollars in congressional directed funding and have written every single village library grant. There aren't blueprints because we don't need them currently for this vote, but you can find a list of every single space and room in both the architect report and the library facilities documents. Likewise, traffic, parking, drainage, groundwater retention, soil testing will all happen in the future if necessary and are not needed for this vote. This is a developed site and these are not concerns. This is the best deal that there will ever be for a public library here in Cottage Grove. And some may say we need to look for other locations or that the time is just not right, and that is misdirection and obstruction. For them, there will never be better alternatives, and there will never be a better time. The recent surge of anti-library rhetoric has been fueled by misleading buzzwords, fake social media profiles, lies, inflammatory postcards and text messages, signs lining our streets, and the deeply personal, individualized attacks on social media and propaganda websites, and this certainly does not reflect our community values. I understand that there may be questions, and I welcome them. I am an open book. That's a literary joke. Transparency, communication, and collaboration are at the heart of this project that so many of us in this village over the last 2 decades have put our time into. This is not just a library project for Cottage Grove, it is an investment in the future of Cottage Grove. And I have no unanswered questions and no reservations.
I have Marcia and Dennis.
I thought we were just supposed to sign in.
Did you want to speak?
I just, you don't go ahead. I have questions. You got a question? You go ahead. I thought we were just signing in.
Dennis Schoaf, I live at 249 East Cottage Grove Road. One of the questions I had about the site was, what is that size-wise compared to the 5 acres?
if you have other, we'll take notes of the questions and we'll answer them after.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed about the site, I know that you're gonna have to take down, I would assume, the trees and the site slopes, so that would have to be leveled out, correct? Am I correct in that?
You can just you can ask all your questions, we'll
Okay,
jot them down
that's
and
fine.
answer, we'll give a full
Yeah,
response.
and so, and I was just wondering if they have the numbers for the current site that we have, what it would take, numbers would be on that site to bring it up to grade, if you want to call it that. And to do, so we can compare that to putting the new building there. So those are some of my concerns.
Thanks. The Learning Ladder site's about 1.9 acres, and the Friend site's a little over 5.
Right. And I guess that my concern would also be at the site there in the village, over there, Learning Ladder, is parking-wise, we're kind of limited from what I see once you get the building in there, if we continue to grow. So those are some of my concerns.
Sure. We're not gonna get into a lot of detail on the current site because that's not what the question
Correct,
on the
I
ballot is.
understand.
However, there's existing master planning that had been done on that site, but that was a different scope project entirely.
I'm just looking at the 1.4 million for that site there, for the Learning Ladder site. And we own the other site, but, you know, of course, we have to improve it. But I'd just like to see what the figures are sometime comparing that. And maybe you've done that already, I don't know.
So the only information we have about the public infrastructure required was done in 2008, and that was roughly $500,000 at that time. I'm not gonna estimate what the cost would be, but it is likely that it would be 2 to 3 times more of what it cost in 2008 to do those
But
improvements.
we'd also have more space, correct? More parking space, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 5-acre site
Right.
versus a 1.9 acre site.
Okay. I guess I think that it needs to be considered, so. Okay. Do you have some questions?
Marcia, did you want to speak?
No, I just thought you could raise your hand, but that's okay.
All right. William?
Actually, that gentleman addressed most of the questions I had.
Okay. Leanne? Okay. Renee?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having this meeting. I am Renee Benzo. I am running for a position on the Village Board of Trustees, and I have a lot of questions. I do appreciate everybody's time and effort put into this. One question I have is there's proposed tax reassessments in the near future. So I'm curious how that is going to affect this in homes that are existing and some of the newer homes, and how that compares to existing homes to newer homes, if there's gonna be a difference in tax rate. I'm wondering if the village determined the price of the Learning Ladder land before or after the purchase of the land, the $1.4 million, when that was determined. And if the referendum goes through, what will the overall village debt be if this referendum passes? And what will the overall village debt go to if the $20 million police station is added to that debt as well? And what would the property tax revenue be on the Learning Ladder property if it were to be sold to a private business versus government building? And if there are any complete or plans drawn up for the proposed library at the Learning Ladder. And to me, it feels like there's a lot of unanswered questions. If there's been any engineer studies, soil studies. I think I heard this correctly, that Miss Kaimi Nelson, Kaimi Nelson, that currently has not factored in to this referendum. So what kind of cost additional would that look like? Okay, I think that's it.
Thanks. As far as the revaluation of properties, that would just make sure everyone's paying their fair share in taxes. The village doesn't collect any more or less in taxes based on a revaluation.
So that will have an impact, so our, will that have an impact on the current,
There's
what's
no way
proposed?
there's no way to know. So basically, there'll be a revaluation and there'll be an average increase in value, in property value for the village. And if the, as an example, if your property was within the average and that average was a 20% increase, then you wouldn't expect any increased taxes based on the revaluation.
Okay, so
But
if
if you're north of the average, then you could expect an increase, and if you're south of the average, then you could have a decrease. But that's independent of decisions that the school district make, village board makes, tech school, county. So
most likely, most home assessments values, hard to know, but may go up.
the vast majority will go up.
Vast majority
Yeah.
will go up.
Right.
So that will also then have an impact on what the proposed taxes, like say, for example,
No.
it won't, so a $450,000 home that's reassessed at, say, 600,000, that's not gonna impact the,
So I
If
think,
that $600,000 home went up by more than the average assessment, then yes.
okay?
and I think this question's actually helping kind of ask why has everybody heard two numbers between the $410,000 average home as discussed in the library referendum, and then during this past budget process, the $315,000 assessed value. So those two numbers are primarily based at, the $315,000 is based off of assessed value. Our current assessment ratio is roughly 77%. You take 315,000 divided by 77%, you get roughly 410,000. So because we're projecting in the future, we're bringing what our assessed value would be at the average home to present what is the estimated tax impact based off of the factors that are known. And so in the table that is presented in the communication, we're presenting what we've already taken into account, the increase in our base for the taxes as the value grows in the community. Hopefully that helped kind of close the loop on.
I can kind of answer the tax question, and maybe Cameron, if you can circle back to the debt-related questions. So the Learning Ladder site, if it would continue as a private site, and projecting with fair market value, they'd pay about $29,000 per year in taxes. The village's portion of that's about $8,600 in taxes.
On the debt side, the presentation that Ellers did presented option 1 and option 2. Option 2 excluded the library but included the police station. Option 1 included the police station but did not include the library. So option 1, if from that presentation, at the end of 2025, our combined outstanding principal would go to $33.6 million. Most of the debt from the police station and the library would be issued in 2026, bringing this village's debt up to 60.8 million, or roughly 78% of our limit, and then subsequently dropping down percentage-wise to 69% the year after, 60 the year after that, and 53 the year after that. If that helps.
I think there was another question, Renee, about drawings and things like.
Yes, are there any plans drawn up for the proposed library or the site?
There is not.
Okay, so is it factored in for possible overflow, or, with any construction project, it rarely stays on target?
All we have is the Engberg report, but they've factored that into their estimate.
Okay.
They have
And if we're, and other questions that have come up is what happens if it exceeds the budget? I mean, that's a determination for a future board to make.
Okay, so there could
But
be.
the village would be authorized up to to exceed the levy by up to 1.3 million. However, a debt service is exempt, so a future board can make whatever determination they want on an increase on the capital side of things. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Just one kind of thing to add. So the Enberg report was what was known at the time. Though they did not reflect cost at current, they escalated those costs as of 2026, when the project would likely be constructed. Again, that was what was known as of December of 2024.
One thing to add, were you still going? Okay. You had asked a question about something to the effect of when was the 1.4 million
Yeah, was that
determined?
decided before or after
Before or after what?
the proposed land purchase of 1.4 million?
So, ask the question again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so was how did the village come up with that price of 1.4?
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
So, when it was determined that the site was available, or was becoming available, they were closing the daycare. Our real estate team that the village uses, Rutabush, they evaluated the site for us and determined what they thought a fair market value would be for that. The asking price of the owners of the Learning Ladder was higher than that. I can't recall exactly what it was. But they evaluated that as we would with any other, acquisition of property. So it was determined through that same sort of process, and there was negotiation through Rutabush with the owners to come up with that purchase price.
thank you. And then I had
There was one,
There was. Yeah, the cost of, has there been any engineering studies to look at supporting the structure? Is there going to be, what type of soil studies? There's a creek that runs back there. So I don't know if there's a projected cost or if that's been looked at in addition to, because it sounds like that's not included in the current proposal.
I don't know to what extent they, estimated, but they certainly have a contingency baked in there. And again, if their number is off, then a future board will have to determine what to do with that. So that's really that's all we can say at this time.
Okay.
yeah, and if you look at that study, they do have experience in building these kinds of buildings, and they're the right team for the job, we think. They are thinking of all of the possibilities in these things when they create these numbers, doing the best they can. As was mentioned in the last informational session, it takes spending resources to get answers to some of those questions, and it's a balancing act for a village board to decide how much to spend to get enough information for people to make the decision without spending too much if the answer is no. And that this is sort of where they stop that line. Asking a very experienced entity to give us a ballpark number And so, it would cost a lot more to do plans, to do a design, to go through the process of, picking through options and what are we gonna do for, how the structure will look and how the square footage will lay out. And that's very costly, and that they wanted, I think it was clear from the discussion with the board that was something that should wait until the community decides whether they want it.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Barbara?
That is such a cute building over there. And I was just wondering if there was any thought to just remodeling it as a library instead of taking it all down and starting all over. I just think it would make a cute library.
Thanks, that's a great question, not foolish at all. So that was, in the Engberg report, that was one of the options that was looked into, and ultimately, it was determined that, having, starting over would be best. It was, the cost to do that was about the same to renovate as to get a new facility, and to get it all on one floor. Made most sense from an ADA perspective, and so like a accessibility perspective, and then for future expansion and things like that. So yeah, that's where they ended up with, and that's why it's being, if the referendum is approved, that's why raising the structure was what was chosen.
Robin?
Hi. My name is Robin Smeckel. I am president of the Friends of the Cottage Grove Community Library. And as you know, the Friends have been advocating for a library for decades. Most recently, the library board has presented 6 models to the village board to build on the land that the Friends currently own. With every presentation, the feedback was the same. It's just too costly. And most of that cost is due to creating the infrastructure to the site. The village board never agreed to send any of these plans to referendum, and they suggested we find a more affordable option for our library. Now, we have that option. After professional evaluations of this site, we know that the building and operating of the library on the Learning Ladder site is less than half the cost to build on the Friends land. Cottage Grove, there is only one library choice on this referendum. The option is to build new on the Learning Ladder site. If the referendum is approved, it will create 13 acres of village-owned property. Plenty of space for a community library, and it leads directly to green space, community park, a creek, and a baseball field. It is the best location for a library in our community. Cottage Grove lacks a community hub, and a yes vote can start creating one. The Friends of the Cottage Grove Community Library endorsed this option and have pledged $100,000 toward the capital campaign. We have also pledged to sell the land we currently own to help offset costs for the library. This is our best chance to get a library now for our community, and I do have a few questions. Can you verify that the $1.3 million requested on the referendum is the maximum amount that the village could possibly levy? And also verify that that includes the building and the operating of the cost of the library. So it's construction, but it's also anything we need to operate the library, including shelves, furniture, staff, and a collection. If that is the case, if that is the total cost, can you confirm that the $1.3 million will not need to be fully levied during the construction years since we won't also be operating a library during that time. One more verification question. The 18% that is noted on the referendum question. Can you verify that that is 18% of the village portion of the taxes that we pay and not our total tax bill? So we are looking at 30% of our tax bill to be raised potentially by 18% at the most. And I'm looking, that's my question. And then also to confirm that the numbers being presented are the all-in cost. So I hear lots of concerns about the soil and any other work that this is part of the process, that a yes vote on the referendum approves the village board to continue looking to see that this is still feasible for our community. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. The 1.3 million is that's the all-in ask on the referendum. However, as explained, it's not necessarily the maximum of the project, depending on what could happen. You know, if you're asking if it's the absolute max, no one knows that, because you have to go through all the process of evaluating the site and with architects and engineers, and then bidding it, which will be in the future, and then you'll see the cost at that time. This is the best information that we have, and the 1.3 does include operations and the capital. However, from a legal perspective, we will have the up to 1.3 million to work with, but debt could exceed that. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it, but it is up to. So to the other question, in those initial years, the board would not have to, because it's up to. They would not have to levy the full freight of the 1.3.
I know Cameron's got some things to add. I think it's a good moment to talk about what is required under the, what's mandatory under the referendum versus what is permissive, right? So as Matt mentioned, to exceed the levy, well, first of all, I think I'll take a step back even yet. The village doesn't have to go to referendum to create a library if they have enough money under the levy to do it, right? And so if a community decided to reduce expenses in other operations to cover, let's say, a portion of something like this, they could do that. That would result in a lower levy. In this case, it was determined by the board that this operational cost was going to require a referendum. It can't cover it under the current levy and what we're allowed to grow from year to year. They also, as Matt said, decided to put the capital, as you pointed out, the building and construction portion of the project in the referendum, so it would be more informative for the voter. But the answer to the question of is 1.3 the maximum the village can levy for the library, if it decided to do so, the answer is no. We can't exceed what we're allowed to do on the operations side without a referendum, but the village could decide, if it came in more expensive than what was expected, the village board could decide to levy more on the capital side, because that does not have to go to referendum. I don't know if they would do that, given the instruction from the community here asking about 1.3, but that is, in other words, what I'm saying is the referendum doesn't limit the village's ability to raise the levy to cover capital expenses.
The next question is a little bit more difficult to answer about what we would be levying during time of construction. Ultimately, I would work with our municipal advisor to determine, is cash funding some of this and not taking out debt going to benefit the village overall? So there might be an in-between of not just levying the operating dollars, but ultimately trying to get the best tax impact for the village at that time. And that $1.3 million was determined based off of the $8 million estimated cost of the library. That $1.3 million did not factor in any capital campaigns grants. So to that question, we would expect depending on the cash flow of the grants and donations, to reduce the overall tax impact. Again, everything that is being presented is independent of other village functions. So we would also expect, based off of village board decisions, other increases or decreases based off of decisions of the village board. Hopefully that was helpful.
And you are correct that the levy portion we're talking about is only the village's portion, does not include school district, tech school, county.
I guess too, with the debt, you typically for a structure like this wouldn't take all the debt out at once. So again, when we're trying to present this to the community and the overall tax impact, this would be almost an 18-month project. So we would structure that and only take debt out at the time that we would actually need it, which would again reduce interest cost. So that's why we felt that $8 million was a conservative estimate, that we are probably going to see some cost on from an interest perspective, but it does give us a level of contingency on price increases and such. Typically things like cost of good increases for construction leads to actual reduced borrowing rates for municipalities, because typically when the cost of construction goes up, the demand for building goes down, which has a positive yield on the bond market, so it actually makes it cheaper for the village to take out debt. So those all kind of things are balanced together and have been evaluated.
Can I ask one more question?
The last question was the 18%, I think.
I think you might
Did you
answer.
cover that? Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Learning Ladder site is privately owned, but it is adjacent to village-owned property. So if this referendum is approved and the village is able to purchase the Learning Ladder site, we're not exclusively limited to this 1 acre, can you remind me how big the site is?
1.9.
We haven't looked into, that would have to be evaluated by, there's certain parks requirements and with parks and open space where
Okay.
I don't know how everything works in that regard, but I believe if you take certain parkland away, you may have to replace it somewhere else, so I don't know how feasible that is.
Okay,
And that would really only relate to if you're going to construct on it, but, certainly there's opportunity if there's open space uses related to the library to use the park.
okay, thank you.
Connie? I just have a couple questions. Can you please come up to the microphone?
Do we have the value of that 5-acre property that would be sold?
Yeah, well, what we were talking about with figuring out what the purchase price was for the Learning Ladder site, it depends on who's willing buyer, what they're willing to spend, what stage. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But one of the things that we can always start with is our assessed value, right? And I think that's 400 and, in fact, I think I just had an email that I was just working on here that said that, but yeah, so it would be determined based on who would buy it, but it's in that $500,000 range.
Okay. And also, would we be seeing any tax revenue from the Amazon project? When would that figure into our coffers?
If you have other it's helpful to just ask all the questions and then we can kind of
Okay, that's my last question.
Okay, perfect. So the Amazon property is in a tax increment district, so the district will close hopefully sooner if there's other development, but it will statutorily, it has to close by 2038. So up until then, So normally the village collects, for our portion, about 30% of the tax bill. While that district is going on, we collect 100% of it, which will be about $5.5 million a year from Amazon. But that needs to be reinvested into the tax increment district that's out there to further other development and the infrastructure needs for that district. And then once that district closes, then that tax revenue is available, which is equivalent to about 1.5-ish million for the village tax bill after that.
Okay.
So
All right.
it's about currently, and again, in 2038, it won't be the same percentage, but today, if it would close today, that would be about a 25%. Amazon alone would account for about 25% of the village's tax levy.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Lori?
Hi, all my questions have been answered, except I was just curious, like, when would is it projected that the library would open? Is it like end of 2026 or 27 or?
There'll be about a year of architectural and engineering work, approximately, and then about a year of construction. So we're looking,
Mid-year
second, third quarter of 2027. Yeah.
Jim?
I was wondering what the income may be from the townships in the surrounding area. That they're right now currently part of the Dane County library system. We're paying money towards the library system in the form of our tax. Because we build a library that disappears, but somehow we should be getting some revenue from the townships.
Cameron, you can speak to that?
Yep. So what you're referring to is when a community meets the Dane County standards, that tax goes away. The revenue for communities, so similar to when our residents use the Penny Library in Madison, some of that money that was collected or levied on our behalf actually gets kind of reallocated to the city of Madison. So Dane County would distribute that in the form of library, what's called aid or interchange aid. When Fitchburg did this, it did take roughly 5 to 6 years before, because it's not a 1-year thing, it's a multi-year average. So we have to bring in more people to our library than go into other libraries. So if we net out to 0, we wouldn't end up getting any additional aid. So it all kind of factors in. So in this example, if enough people came from the town of Cottage Grove to the village, but there were still more people from the village going to Madison, in the background, we would end up not getting anything. But if we were able to keep all of those people in the community, we would potentially see an aid increase. But it does take several years to take effect.
So in effect, what you're saying is, if you lived in the township of, we'll say Sun Prairie, let's not use Cottage Grove, township of Sun Prairie, in all likelihood, they're not gonna see any kind of increase in their tax bill unless they have a lot of usage of the library that we would potentially be building.
So us creating a library would actually not increase any other community's Dane County library tax. That is a flat percentage based off of equalized value outside of a TID district. So unless the town of Sun Prairie in this example created a ton of development or a ton of new houses, the only thing that would increase is an increase in the rate or an increase in the value. But that rate stays relatively consistent year over year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Cassandra?
Thanks for doing this. I thought I was following along with all of the documents and reports and everything, but through today's conversation, I do have a few questions. So Cameron, when you talked about the debt service and the rating for the two options, one with police station and library and the other one with just the police station, I didn't hear, and I was having trouble going back to reference, what is the difference in that debt percentage between the two options? And is that difference considered a considerably higher rate if we add the library as a project? Trying to gauge if that's a major significance. And then secondly, I've heard questions about, from friends and whatnot, if that rate is harmful to our bond rating. Are we looked at as being, is it a risky investment? I heard our financial representatives say something at a meeting, but it would be good to just reiterate that and make sure I interpret it correctly. And I also wanted to ask, with the police station, are they developing some piece of parkland too? In response to the question about would we be able to utilize some of the parkland at Community Park if the library needed to expand in future years, and then having to possibly offset that with other park creation. My last question is, my understanding is that this project would be eligible for a community development block grant for their facilities program, upwards of like $1 million. And I just want to confirm that we are eligible for that on top of our capital campaign fundraising.
Okay, I can, is that your last question?
Yeah.
I'm going to take the first question. So as presented in the Ellers financial management plan update, the difference between option 1 and option 2 is a 10% difference in 2026. Just want to also put out there, not all debt is the same. So as a community grows, it's expected that you're going to need more facilities to address and serve the community. And so Matt will touch a little bit on the bond rating factor.
And just to clarify, Cameron, not the same as far as the perspective how Standard & Poor's, the bond rating agency, reviews it. They take a look at legacy projects like 40+ year assets a little bit differently. And as far as the harmful or not to the bond rating, that's really to be determined. There's no other way to, you don't know until you go and get a bond rating. So our financial advisor wouldn't and couldn't give a clear response on that.
As far as the question about the CDBG block grant, it is a grant that we are eligible to apply for to DOA. The village board did authorize staff to work on that application. We are applying for the maximum amount of $1 million, which would require a $500,000 match. We're obviously spending would be spending $8 million, so that's not an issue there. And the other grant that's out there, the WDC grant, we've applied for it, have not heard back yet if we were approved or not.
And just a little bit of elaboration on the financial advisor. So they will say if something is definitively going to be harmful to the bond rating. So if it's completely infeasible, they say that. But if it's somewhat undetermined, they don't really say anything. They just say that it's because you don't know until you go have the bond rating call with Standard & Poor's.
Okay.
And I think, and I've tried
so
to.
we know it's not at a level that would be definitively bad, but it's 78% of.
Yeah.
But it peaks at that 1 year and then is planned to come down. However, yeah.
And just to kind of where debt capacity comes from, it's 5% of our equalized value. So to set in a community like us that are growing so exponentially, to say we want to stay at 50 or we want to stay at 60, well, if our equalized value went up by 30 million, we would then having to increase or targeting to increase our debt by that much. So it's more about what is the collective impact as opposed to the percentage. Kind of while you're looking at the financial management plan, or if anybody has, when Ellers makes a recommendation, it's not based off of necessarily the debt, it's the collective operating and debt service. So there could be scenarios where a lower debt percentage was presented, but ultimately they didn't recommend it. In that case, they were not recommending it because of the debt. Without going to referendum, there wasn't an ability to fund the operations. So because we brought a referendum question to the table, they're saying, well, if you have the authority to increase your levy, under option 1, that debt service along with the ability to increase your levy, is ultimately up to you. But they're not the ones saying, go ahead and do it. This is okay in the parameters of kind of the management.
Can I ask just a small follow-up to this? My understanding from what I heard the financial advisor share was that we've planned this out. We have a financial management plan that shows how these investments are being made, and it peaks, but then it comes back down. And that in and of itself is very helpful to the bond rating discussions when they would be had. Is that correct, incorrect,
So
half correct?
We currently get the highest grading for what's called the management score. So we do comprehensive capital planning, comprehensive year-over-year debt service planning. For S&P, it depends on who you get. I think everybody looks at maybe things a little bit, differently. So it depends on what else is going on in the macro environment. But typically, for our management score, we've scored well because of this extensive planning, year-over-year prioritization.
Great, and thank you for that.
And the parkland,
Oh, yeah.
the police site has, it's not dedicated parkland, it's just
Green space.
green space that's not needed at this time from a building perspective, but, potential, it could be needed in the future for expansion of
Sure.
either that facility or the municipal services building next to it. But it's just planned open space for now.
Got it.
And
Thanks.
it was just shown on the site that, I think some kids playing soccer or something like that. That's just like an option.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
John?
Most of my questions have been answered, but I just want to take a couple moments here to thank the staff for putting this on, the elected officials for encouraging that. Cindy, appreciate all your time and effort into this. I just ask everyone to keep in mind that Cindy, as well as the other trustees, are our neighbors, whether you agree with them or not. Personal attacks are not very kind or pleasant, and I just want to remind that of everyone. Additionally, social media may not be the best opportunity to get your facts from. I sent an open records request to Matt and the staff back in October that answered most of my questions, and within 10 days were answered completely. So Matt, I want to thank you sincerely with that. The one comment I'll make on the topic itself, one of my questions was if I could get a copy of the last financial management plan that included a library for the village. The response, I don't think I'm breaking anything because it was an open records request, and I think your response would be the same whether it be myself or anyone else. Financial management plan was never approved. That included a library. We have attached a copy of the plan that was presented to the village board in 2022, but it was never adopted. It's a different topic. I don't know why we're putting together financial management plans that never get adopted, but that's for the village board to decide. There are 3 different different scenarios for libraries, and that was analyzed, and you even identified the pages for me to look up. So in conclusion, I want to thank everyone for their time, their efforts on this. My personal opinion is if it's not in the financial management plan, similar to my personal budget at home, now is not the right time, and I would encourage voters to consider that as an option. It's not that people are against the library, it's just what we can afford at this time. So thank you very much.
John, just one comment for clarification. Yep. The timing of that request was before the board did these 2 options of the financial management plan, one of which now includes this library proposal. Okay. So that was
So you're saying
done.
the financial management plan was approved within the last, let's say, 4 or 5 months that included the library?
It was late in, I can't remember the exact timing, but it was, I want to say you asked in like October, and it was,
January 13th.
yeah.
Okay, sounds good, fair enough.
But that plan does have two, as these guys have been saying, it has two options, right? And it's sort of, which plan is going to be used moving forward will depend on this referendum question.
Yeah, thanks.
And the plan that did not, the response to the records request, that was a proposal for different scope library on the Friends land, separate entirely from this process, so.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
My
sorry, that's
experience with the financial management plans, it goes out about 5 years, and sounds like one was put together within the last 3 months, so 3 months for a referendum, I mean, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Can I touch on the financial management plan? John was correct. The 2022 and 2021 financial management plan were presented but never adopted. At that point in time, that did trigger kind of us working with our municipal advisor, coming up with a capital prioritization process. The first year that was presented in 2023, the board ultimately went through the process, grading. The 2023 financial management plan was approved, and then process happened again in 2024. Financial management plan was approved, I think about August, and then January 13th, the amended 2025 financial management plan included the library at the current scope. So will continue to plan, unless directed otherwise, to do that prioritization process where each board member can provide feedback on projects that are being proposed.
We're going to take one online. Pete Dahl.
All right, well, thank you for letting me speak online. I could not make it to Village Hall with other commitments. I know that many residents have put many hours into this project. I certainly appreciate their passion and efforts. However, this is not a now or never question, as some suggest, and certainly not our best chance. For the record, here are the facts. This is a long-term investment, and this location has only been on the table since late last year. I believe it was in October. Furthermore, it wasn't considered for demolition and a new build site until December of last year. So the time to complete due diligence for new construction options to optimize a project for taxpayers hasn't been completed, clearly. And I would like to point out 3 things. So the learning ladder after demo, the cost of the land is going to be $1.7 million, and that can be found in the EAA report on page 45 that's online. So the acquisition, the option fee, the commission, and the demo cost, $1.7 million. It's a 1.9 acre site. That makes that land cost $914,000 per acre. For a fair market value comparison, there is an active listing on Court Crossing. It's on LoopNet, and you can look it up on LoopNet. It's a 2.8 acre site for $595,000. That cost of that land is $207,000 per acre. That's over 4 times the value or the fair market value equivalent that's a comparable online, or that's comparably listed. And the Friends of the Library land, there's been an argument that there's millions of dollars necessary to put in the services. Well, that was true up until recently. A development project was approved that's going to put in the road, the fundamental way, and the utilities, essentially eliminating that incremental cost. So the Friends of the Library land is a 5 acre site near both schools. I think when you think about long-term options, it certainly should be in the consideration set. And like I said, the due diligence has not been completed as it relates to this. So a couple items that I'd like to point out. Tariffs will increase the cost. We don't know by how much, but again, that's certainly a risk to the project in terms of the capital side, which can go up, and I do have a question at the end for that. Cottage Grove already has library services, the Penny, the Bookmobile, the 4 school libraries. Clearly it would be nice to have a library in Cottage Grove at some point, but this is not an urgent need or a missing service. The Friends of the Library land clearly is larger. It represents a better long-term site. It was in the library strategic plan. It was approved in 2022 by the village board as the preferred location. And for us to walk away in a matter of months and throw a massive referendum onto taxpayers is simply irresponsible. Many families cannot afford more taxes. The village has $29 million of unfunded safety and infrastructure projects that can be found on the village website. MG School Finances, they met last night, they're still in a mess and there's a lot of unknowns. And so the net tax impact on that is unknown. And village debt will reach a dangerous 78% of borrowing capacity. I know there's a lot of, is it going to hurt our bond rate? Is it not? It's 78% of what we can actually borrow, which is absolutely astonishing to me. So, this is a long-term decision. This is a bad deal at the wrong time. There are no drawings, there's no design, and the unknowns are limitless because there is no design. Using the existing community parkland is not part of the referendum. To be clear, it's a 1.9 acre site, and I compared the sizes and the options that haven't been vetted. This is not the time, that's not the location, it's not the right cost. So here's my question. Of the $1.3 million increase in the annual levy, or 18.4% of what we levied last year, the year one operating costs were estimated on the village documents of about $700,000 a year and cannot go up. I think, Larry, you pointed out the operating costs are approved by the referendum and limited by our equalized value. However, the capital recovery cost in the 1.3 million is estimated at $560,000. And I just want to clarify, if the referendum is approved and capital costs are higher based on the facts that we don't have drawings, we don't have a lot of cost estimates, there's a lot of cost pressures on tariffs and other construction materials, and if the final construction costs are significantly higher, could the tax impact to taxpayers go up? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, yes, and I've covered that to some extent already. The village board would be within its authority to raise additional revenue, which could certainly would impact the tax impact of this particular project. They could increase to cover capital expenses without an additional referendum.
And the operational figure is not static either. The referendum question would, if approved, gives the board up to 1.3 million. So theoretically, and this is for future boards to decide, but you have 1.3 million to work with. And legally that, eventually the debt service will be paid off, and the village will still have that 1.3 million to work with, but it's up to, so it's all up to the board's discretion.
All right, the next one is just the name Tribadoo. All right, next one will be Sue.
Good afternoon. Sue Meng, 307 Southern Grange. Echo others, thank you for taking your time and doing your best to educate the voters on the actual impact and facts. I've heard a little bit about the Amazon tax increment district. I believe anyway, Culver's tax increment is also closing, and maybe others. Would they have an impact to the library project, or just to the village and other projects like the police department that are already accounted for? Another question, when is the home reevaluation happening specifically? Other priorities for the village that are or are not getting funded, and I heard Cindy mentioned that this library project is its sole thing, not impacting, but I don't understand how that can be true if our debt financing is what it is, that we're having to prioritize streets or water or sewage or whatever other projects still impacts the village as a bottom line. So I think that's all my questions at this point.
I can take it. Yeah. So as you had mentioned, so we have tax incremental district number 7 closed in 2024. Residents would have felt the relief that had on this last tax bill that went out in December for 2025 taxes. TID number 5, the board hasn't taken action yet, but given the
Cameron, I don't think people know what TID
sorry.
7 and TID 5. So TID 7 that he mentioned initially, that's that kind of covers the Old Town area, just so you guys have a frame of reference of the types of development. TID 5 covers the primarily the Commerce Park, so Culver's, Summit, all of that. That will have a much bigger impact than the TID 7 closure. So if you can cover the context of how that will help. And to the broader question, it doesn't help any individual project, it helps the village in general.
And so while TID 7 had a modest impact on reducing or providing a net or a decrease, in TID 5 will have a much more significant decrease due to the size of that district. And that would be for taxes that would go out in 2026 for 2027. Strategically, before the library was considered, and when we were evaluating the police station, that was determined with a combination of the MSB debt coming off, as well as this district coming back onto the gross tax roll, that it would be a good time to bring a facility project of that scope online for our public safety. For the revaluation in the 2025 budget, the village board approved a revaluation. That revaluation will happen January 1 of 2026. As Matt had previously mentioned, revaluations do not give the village authority to levy any additional taxes. It just reevaluates the base that's used. So everybody would see if our assessment ratio is 77%. Everybody could expect to see a 23% increase in the value of their property if it was just being brought up to fair market value. The science is a much more detailed than that, and it's a process that takes roughly a year, and where they would go and evaluate the fair value or the assessed value. When they do that assessment, it's not uncommon not to have a perfect assessment ratio of 100%. Every once in a while, you could have an assessment ratio where your assessment is greater than your fair market value. Again, that doesn't mean that the village is able to charge more, it just, the value is higher.
And the closure of that TIF district number 5 it doesn't just benefit the village's portion of the taxes, it'll benefit all the taxing jurisdictions. So the Monona Grove School District and Tech School and County as well. And then there's actually a cash balance to the district too, so there'll be a cash payment equivalent to the various percentages of those districts. So the village will get a third of that cash. The school district would get a little over 50%, which for the school district, do you remember what that number is, Cameron?
It's just over $1 million.
Yeah, that they'll get in cash. So that's a cash payment, and then in addition, they'll get the added tax base for the following year.
So when TID 7 closed, just to put it in perspective, when we're talking about $1 million, when TID 7 closed, or the Old Town area, we received $47,000. So when we're talking about almost $500,000 or $400,000 that the village would get, just to speak on the scope different of the overall project districts.
Heidi?
Sorry, you didn't mention at all about the other priorities that may or may not be getting funded or chosen to get funded because of this large debt?
Sure. The easiest way yes, thanks, Larry. There's a follow-up question that we failed to answer, and that was regarding, projects that may or may not be funded, should the referendum get approved, or I believe that's what the question was. Probably, you may not like the answer, but the truth is, that's all up to future board, because plans are plans, and a future board could choose to do no projects or more projects. A A future board could choose to go well above 78%. They could go 99%. So it's impossible for us to, we'll implement whatever majority of the board wants to do.
And so how it gets to the board, departments, so Public Works will evaluate infrastructure projects, public safety projects. Those projects end up being compiled and kind of create our capital inventory. And that, we try to ask departments to do that over the course. What do they think is gonna be needed over a 10-year time horizon? That list, like many other wish lists, is significantly greater than what the village's ability would be even to fund in its entirety. So ultimately, the village board grades the projects. We go back with our with Ellers and kind of determine, well, what is our first step? So budget review would receive the first step of the financial management plan, which is likely or more likely than not going to have more projects on there that then will be funded. After budget review, it would go to village board, and village board would take the tax impact on the projects that have been approved. So it's every year it's a refining process to make sure our current factors being accounted for, our current infrastructure's needs being accounted for, and really is why we do that on an annual basis, because so much changes.
Now we'll have Heidi.
I'll be brief here because I know I'm taking up time from everyone's day, but I appreciate everyone coming to the information session. I think that this is the best place to learn information and become an educated voter on this question in front of us. I am currently on the village board, and I voted to send this referendum question to the voters. The prior library plan was unable to move forward in the financial management plan. There were barriers to the site, the cost was too extensive, and personally, I felt the site was not as accessible as what I would ideally locate a library. The opportunity arose to potentially place a library in the very heart of our community. This is a walkable, bikeable, accessible place. Libraries do not just serve children, they serve people of all ages. And this site location was the primary driver for me to send this to referendum currently. This opportunity to have a site in the central part of our community that, well, for a year sends us up to a higher than perhaps maybe very comfortable in our borrowing capacity, but does trend down as projected. In addition, this year we sent $348,000 to Dane County to pay for services in other communities to serve our residents with library services. The Bookmobile and other libraries in Dane County, and that money could be redirected here. So that is tied to equalized value, which could raise in the future. Dane County controls that. We're sending our money to Madison, to Sun Prairie, to Deerfield to serve our community. And so I thought with all of those factors at play that this should be in front of the residents to decide the people that this library would serve, the people that would pay for this library, because it is a community asset that would be here for generations to come. So I felt it was the right decision to send this to referendum for the community to decide. So thank you for being here and providing all the answers to residents' questions. Thank you.
Next, we have Beth online.
Hi, just a quick clarification. You keep on talking about the changing of the board, as of our elections also on April 1st. If the board changes and a referendum has a yes to it, could the board still vote that they do not want to follow through with the community's choices and stuff like that? My other question is, we talk about this police department that's going in, and I did hear you mention earlier about the fact that there was chance for growth there. I'm assuming this is the piece of property, the big grassy piece of property that's behind where the police department is right now. Has there ever been any thought, I have seen other villages where a library and the police department are in the same building, the efficiency of having a building like that, sharing possible bathrooms, sharing meeting rooms and stuff like that, why, and we already own that land. So what about the thought of putting a library with a police station? I mean, if the Friends were looking at selling that land and you said that that cost, Larry, was like $500,000, that's a nice chunk of change towards an addition on to the police department. So I think that's it.
Well, I'll take the first question. So the Learning Ladder site, the village board has an option on that property right now. We're not under contract required to purchase it if the referendum is approved. So the board would have to take affirmative action to actually purchase that property, even if the referendum is passed. And they would not be required to do that. So they could decide not to move ahead despite the referendum. And I'll let someone else cover the second question.
So the police department, I think the land that you're referring to is not the parkland. The land I think you're referring to is actually owned by Andrew Homburg. That's located north of the village's own property. And again, it's not on for this ballot, but over the years, there certainly has been at least discussion of options of combining facilities, but there was it didn't come to fruition. And once it was understood how much actual square footage the police department needs well into the future, that there was it wasn't realistic to combine facilities unless we were going to go 2-3 stories high, which adds cost. But certainly that's until something's done, there's always options for things to be looked into should a future board want to do so.
I will touch on that. Should the board not move forward, we would require to notify DOR, meaning even if there was a yes vote, if we did not build and construct a library, we would not actually be able to levy those funds because they are restricted in nature.
DOR is Department of Revenue for the state.
I shouldn't use acronyms. Additionally, any capital campaign funds that would be required to be follow the term of the pledge forms, which would more likely than not result into returning those to those individuals.
Well, the reason I asked that was just because there are several people who are out campaigning for trustee that are very vocal against the library, and there are some that are for. And that's why I was curious, because I thought I overheard that the other day, that I was under the understanding that if the vote came through as a yes, then it had to go through. And that's why I wanted to clarify, because I was under the understanding it didn't have to, depending upon who was on the board. So thank you for clarifying that.
Carol? All right. No, Carol. Then we'll go with Stefan online.
Good afternoon. This is Stefan Way, 100 Cole Parkway. First, I want to thank the trustees who have spoken today. Unfortunately, I missed Cindy's comments, but hearing the reasoning Heidi voted in favor of the referendum, and hearing from Peter, of course, is important. I am glad to hear that Peter sounds like he is now supportive of having a library at some point in time. So that's progress there. So I really appreciate that. I am curious because I don't know the full history if we've ever experienced a referendum like the one we're going through right now regarding the purchase of land, and if we did, was this a similar process where we did a referendum prior to our investing the tens, if not $100,000 in engineering designs and groundwater tests and those sorts of things. So when we've bought buildings, when the village have bought buildings or have bought property, have those things been done prior to a referendum statement? Is that traditionally done or not? Or is this a pretty unique situation?
Good question, Stefan, and it's getting more and more rare for me to be able to say this, but it was before my time that the referendum question was, the last one was done in 2008. I don't know what kind of due diligence was done ahead of that.
And to be clear, it's just not about the library, it's about the purchase of anything.
The village hasn't done any other referendums to my knowledge.
Okay. And have they done any other purchases where they've had to, before the purchase was done, to do the steps of groundwater and all this other stuff before the purchase was complete?
Yeah, I think Larry can cover. I mean, we do certain environmental tests before purchasing. It's contingent on before purchase.
Every site raises a different set of flags in the real estate world. If the village was going to buy a site that was, potentially known as a former fueling station, something like that, we would at least look to see if that had been cleaned up and there was sufficient information about that site on the DNR's website. There's background things like that that are done. Some sites that are greenfield, it's less so. I know that there's a number of sites that we've sold or transferred to developers in the Commerce Park that had some higher costs associated with, the underground or the geological situation, but it's really very specific to a particular location. If it's, it's based more, Stefan, on what kind of flags are raised, if any.
And I think this may help.
And are we seeing any of those flags with this situation?
Sorry, could you say that again? We spoke at the same time.
Sorry, and my apologies.
Okay.
Are we seeing any of those flags, or are there any of those risks with not doing the environmental tests or having the engineering designs? What, if any, are the risks of passing the referendum before having those things in place?
So on the environmental side, we don't see any flags there, given the historic use and what would be likely to, it's not a former dry cleaning location or something like that. So I think you can set that aside as far as there's no flags there. Enberg Anderson did put boots on the ground in the location, and included in that is just sort of a general evaluation of the site and what they think would be likely in terms of any sort of higher cost risks associated with site conditions, and they included that analysis in all of their estimates to us.
And because of municipal referendums are tied to the levies, which are, and the limits are tied to operational costs, normally you don't have this level of due diligence because you're talking about operational costs and not vetting a property. You're talking about providing a service and hiring people.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Kimberly?
Red is on, right? Okay, sorry. Oh, hi, I'm Kim Vecchi. I live at 411 Coyle Parkway with 2 wonderful kids, pretty great husband, and 2 awful freeloading cats. I'm a dog person. We moved here about 15 years ago. We rented first, and then we ended up buying. After lots of shopping around, we chose Cottage Grove for a lot of reasons. We chose this village. I mean, it was small, it was quiet, it's good, but we also knew it would be growing, and we wanted to be part of a growing community. And knowing that growing pains often happen, and that referendums would be part of the growing pains. That was a risk we took. And I appreciate the time that you've all put in to be here today and give us the facts. Understanding public administration and debt management strategy, that's not in everybody's wheelhouse. That's what we pay you guys to do. So thank you again for putting these sessions on and helping us understand the facts. Well, and I'm sorry, I'm so nervous. This is the first time I've ever done this. Like, the library is what brought me out of my house for 15 years. I've never been to a meeting like this, and I just, seeing my village get peppered with protest signs about the library is honestly what's bringing me here today. And then, God, I made the mistake of going on social media to try to figure out what the heck was going on, and wow, that's why I'm here. The politicization of something that's for everyone, a library, the deliberate deception, the twisted truths, omitted details, like manufactured fear, and the disingenuous comparisons, it's frustrating, and we deserve better. And so it's insulting, it's dangerous. It's not okay to get my neighbors all worked up about this, or us. We deserve facts, and I believe that you all are working in our best interest by putting this on as administrative staff. I'm tired. I work a lot of hours. We don't have a ton of money. An average of $500 a year, that's a lot for us. And so I'm taking this decision very seriously. And I just want to know what this would cost me. So I see the latest round of candidates, and I hear and I see who is choosing to roll up next to those that lie and deliberately deceive, and I'm concerned. And that's all the more reason that we need a library. We need our community, and we need it tightly knit together. We need critical thinking skills, and we need to learn and grow. I know my time just went up. My question to you is, I appreciate that the anticipated tax impact. Do we have any revenue impact projections that I could use to offset the impact? And are those, did I miss those? Is there a projection, and do we know when those would kick in? Is it right away? Do we have to wait? Sorry, that's it.
Thank you, and obviously based off of the information you shared in your comment, your house is gonna be right around what we would consider the average home in Cottage Grove. So when you do see that information, it's a little bit higher, but that would be where to get that information. As far as revenue, the only sources of revenue that we currently have to potentially defray cost would be any donations or capital campaign, and then eventually subsequent interchange aid or aid that would come from people utilizing the library should it generate a net positive inflow. The other potential way eventually would be if an endowment fund was created, or the community, there's some interest revenue that could potentially offset the overall revenue, but there's no other revenues that have been set aside to help defray the cost of this project.
And then as already has been discussed, there may be a reduction in the county levy. There may be some grants that would go into it too.
Yeah, and I do think Matt touched on this a little bit earlier about $34 on when the Dane cut based off of the current tax. So that would be $34 per 100,000 of equalized value. It's more likely than not that would be the tax bills that go out December of 27 for the 2028 budget. So there is going to potentially be a couple of years where that reduction is not going to occur because we haven't met the standard.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cheryl? Okay.
Sorry, I just thought of one thing. There are grants that have been applied for. I did comment on it before, but other revenue sources, any revenue, any grants that were awarded that were to defray the cost of the building would go to offset. I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure I didn't exclude that.
Mark?
Thank you. Like the last resident, I'm tired. I've been working hard at this, plus my regular job. I own my own business. There's been a lot of talk today about social media. I put a lot of information on social media, not to scare people, but to tell them the truth. I've been very respectful. In fact, the majority of my responses are respectfully. It's not until people engage in back and forth, not based on fact, but what they may have heard, that I disengage. Every dollar amount that I've put on social media is backed by documents that I received after FOIAing them from the village. Every doorstep where I've talked to an individual, every dollar amount, every document that I've shown you came directly from the village. Don't let anybody tell you that I'm not dealing in facts. I am dealing in only facts. When I redirect you to a site that says it's 4 times more expensive, Peter Dahl actually extrapolated that in a very straightforward fashion and gave you an exact example of where that's the case. We're talking about taxpayers. We're talking about taxpayers' dollars. I'm running to save the taxpayers. This isn't a personal vendetta against the library. My first most valuable card I ever had was a library because I grew up poor in Beloit, Wisconsin, and our highlight was going to the library every Saturday. We didn't have a bookmobile. We didn't have library services that came out to us. It was a big deal. I don't take this lightly. I'm not voting against the library and telling people all these numbers because I don't value libraries. I'm doing it because people can't afford it. With the American Legion, I talked to seniors that another $500 increase to their taxes could put them out of their homes. I've got young families that live next to me. $500 in additional taxes are huge. This coming year, $77, I believe it is, per 100 for the third year of the school referendum. $60 projected by the village for every $100,000 in value on the police station. $116 per 100. All these documents, all these numbers came directly from the village to me. These are not made up numbers. These are real numbers that are going to affect real people. I deal with what is now. I don't talk about grants that aren't here. I don't talk about what could go down because it could just as likely go up. If we have a 25% tariff on lumber and steel, which we do today, it's a fact, it's here today, could go away tomorrow, but today it's here, that adds a lot to these buildings, whether it's a library or a police station. People are like, do you like a police station? I'm for essential critical services before a non-essential service. And you can argue, is a library essential or non-essential? I don't call my librarian when my house is on fire. I don't call it when I've got a crime being committed in front of my house. I don't call it when my next door neighbor is having a heart attack and I need somebody there. It's a non-essential service. Is it valued? Yes. Highly valued? Absolutely. Does it bring community together? Yes. We have 9,345 people in this community. Right now, we're $31 million in debt. We talk hundreds of thousands of dollars. Last year in debt, we spent $847,000 in just interest on that debt, and we're looking to take that debt and double it. It's not responsible. If I come to your home and I'm passionate, it's because I'm passionate to keep the people that came out of Vietnam, bought houses here, paid them off in the 90s, sent their kids to school, and just want to die in their homes and have that dignity, not have that taken away from them because we overtax them. That's all I have to say. I thank everybody for their time. And please understand, there's no disrespect to anybody that wants a library. I understand that. Do I think a library is something that could be vital in the future of Cottage Grove? Absolutely. The Heyday Project, one more, and I'm probably over time by now because I talk long, but the Heyday Project actually allows that parcel of land to be developed so that way those extra costs that have stopped the library in the past would not be there. If a library is not going to be on that property, it's not going to probably be what you think due to the fact that they're going to have to finance all those services themselves. Heyday said, and I was at the meeting, that we're only going to finance it if it's going to be a library there. Without the library, that value after Heyday goes in goes down, not up. And that's it. Thank you very much.
That is the end of the list. Unless we have anybody online, I don't see any hands.